Two other concepts that will help you understand how racism is built into the fabric of society and how it's perpetuated are the concepts of ideological racism and systemic racism. Ideological racism is really referring to a belief system, what people think. It is also referring to a broader way of thinking, how people across an entire social order, such as a nationality, might think about an issue. The belief system is incorporated into the culture of the society, and the idea passes from one generation to another. So, ideological racism is a belief system of a society, and not just of one individual. On the other hand, systemic racism refers to a belief that one group is superior to another due to genetic, biological, or cultural differences. Hopefully, you can see how these two concepts, ideological racism and systemic racism, are interrelated. So let's return to the starting point of this chapter, that there's a difference between race and ethnicity. This chart helps you understand that difference. A huge difference is that the identity of race gets imposed by those that are in power in society, while the identity of ethnicity is controlled more by the group who owns the ethnic category. Race is highly political. By its very nature, it's based on power differentials between groups of people and creates and perpetuates unequal economic, social, and political power differentials. In general, ethnicity is not the basis for these kinds of social, hierarchical outcomes. This idea of inherent differences between the races and the issue of superiority was furthered by the studies of a doctor from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Samuel Morton. He studied human skulls, collecting them worldwide. He measured the cranial cavities by filling them with lead pellets and then calculated the volume of the cranial cavity. He claimed that he could tell the race of a person by how big the cranial cavity was. And, of course, he found that Europeans had the largest brain cavity, implying that they had bigger brains and were more intelligent. Morton claimed in his publication, Crania Americana, that the Caucasians had the biggest brains, averaging 87 cubic inches. Indians were in the middle with an average of 82 cubic inches, and Negroes had the smallest with an average of 78 cubic inches. An interesting bias that existed was that Morton's beliefs stemmed from his religious convictions. He believed that the skulls of each race were so different because the wise creator from the beginning had created each race and positioned them in separate homelands to dwell in. Morton believed that cranial capacity determined intellectual ability, and he used his craniometric evidence in conjunction with his analysis of anthropological literature then available. He argued in favor of racial hierarchy, which put Caucasians on the top rung and Africans on the bottom. These differences in skull measurements came to serve as the, quote, evidence, unquote, for racial stereotypes. Fast forward now several hundred years, when Morton's findings are hotly contested. In his 1981 writings, The Mismeasure of Man, Stephen Jay Gould asserted that Morton had, perhaps because of an unconscious bias, selectively reported data, manipulated sample compositions, made analytical errors, and mismeasured skulls in order to support his prejudiced views on intelligence differences between different populations. Gould's book became widely read, and Morton came to be considered one of the main cases of the effects of unconscious bias in data collection, and also as one of the main figures in the early history of scientific racism.